There is a drug epidemic happening here in America. Our fathers, mothers, sisters, brothers, nieces, and nephews are dying each and every day. Enough is enough. It's time to fight back. Welcome. You are now about to witness the beginnings of the underground church in America. Our government has been infiltrated with Luciferians, and our cities have been infiltrated with madness. They want our heads. They want our silence. This is our response in Christian resistance. We are a select few of Christian soldiers, and we need to know, are you down? And now, for the minister.
Super Soda Jerk.
Welcome to Story Time with Super Soda Jerk. I'd like to share with you some stories from my past. You know, I minister to people about getting clean and sober off of drugs and alcohol and whatnot. And, you know, I always say that I could relate because I used to be an addict myself, you know. But I want to go deeper in the depth about my past life, about my addiction, so people could kind of know that where I've been, you know, and that I do know what I'm talking about when it comes to addiction. You know, for a long time I was lost, you know, and it all started when I was 8 years old. You know, I live in Texas now, but when I was 8, I used to live in San Jose, California, and used to have a friend that he was older than I was. He was around 12 years old. I used to hang out with him. And we had heard about the neighborhood kids that were sniffing rubber cement. That's what they would call it back in those days, right? They'd put rubber cement in a bag and huff it, and they would just start tripping out, right? So we decided that that's what we were going to do. And it was on a Sunday morning, I believe. Saturday morning, I believe, and we had got a hold of some rubber cement and 2 little baggies, right? And we went to this is in San Jose. It was a park called Hillview, and it's not like that anymore. But back in those days, early '80s, right? It was hills. It was a bunch of hills and valleys, you know, and a lot of trees and whatnot. And so we're looking for a spot that we could do this drug and this rubber cement. And so we climbed up in a tree. You know, that's what kids do. You know, we climbed up in a tree and, you know, we started huffing this rubber cement. And, you know, soon after, my friend said, hey, I think the tree's moving. You know, I think this tree's moving. And I said, no, the tree's not moving. He goes, yeah, man, I swear this tree's moving. And I jumped down and I felt the ground and just to tell him, look, this tree's not moving, you know, we're good. And I jumped back up there and we started huffing rubber cement, you know. And all of a sudden we felt a jolt and the tree was moving, you know. You know, people were playing soccer and they were having picnics and they were, you know, everything you do on a Saturday in the park, you know, jogging, I mean, everything you'd want to do. And here, me and a friend of mine, we were literally riding a tree around the park, going down these valleys and up these hills, hanging onto a tree, you know, scared out of our wits, you know, that this tree is, you know, moving, you know, when we're on it. Well, anyways, we came up to this one hill and the tree, it was so steep that the tree actually fell back on itself and actually flipped over and landed in the same spot that we started in, you know. And of course, that startled us. We got down from the tree and we went on back home, you know. And, you know, a little story from my past, you know, I was literally riding a tree in my mind, you know, around a park, you know, and this is when I was 8 years old. So this is where my addiction started, you know, because that young 8-year-old, he grew up, you know, And as life went on, at a very young age, by the time I was in 6th grade, I already had my first line of coke. I already had my first hit of weed. You know, I was smoking weed. The very next year in junior high, in 7th grade, you know, I was already graduated to meth, acid, PCP, you know, and I continued to grow up as a young man. And the life that I had lived was all about my high, my drugs. And the reason I'm telling you all this is because I had a drug mind. And so anything anybody would ever try to tell me, I wouldn't listen to, because I had a drug mind. I was on drugs and I just wouldn't listen to it. Everything, my whole life was about me, my high, you know, my drink, my weed, everything. As soon as I get my check, I would be going to the dope house. I was a prisoner. I was a prisoner to drugs. You know, so when I minister to people, I've been there. You know, it don't take much for me to believe that addicts could turn their life around, because at one time I had that drug mind. Okay? And what I mean by drug mind, let me explain it to you. You know, I minister at my local county jail to inmates. I don't even like to call them, they're my congregation, okay? They're some of the best people you'd ever want to be around. Okay, they just made some mistakes in their life, okay? But I minister to them, and I see them when they first come in, and they have that drug mind. And at first, I can't even have a conversation with them, because their mind is so clouded with the drugs, they're not making no sense. You can't even have a conversation with them. But as the weeks go on, I could see them being more and more coherent, where I could have a conversation with them. Their skin starts turning normal color. They start looking healthier, talking right, making sense. And then I'm able to go and really to minister to them, because before they weren't listening to anything I had to say. I know how that's like, because at one time I had a drug mind. And what I'm trying to tell you is this: that Jesus is able to heal you from that drug mind. 100%. So if you're dealing with addiction, or you have a family member, don't give up. I'm sure glad that somebody didn't give up on me. They kept on praying. I got a mom that prayed for me, and they didn't give up on me. And there were people still praying for me and still believing that one day I would change. And guess what? One day, God came knocking. So when I give you advice, and I made this series, The Antidote for Addiction, I know I've been there. I started at a very young age. Okay? But I want to share something with you before I let you go. It's really quick, and it's from Matthew 3:12, okay? It reads like this. Talking about, John the Baptist is talking about Jesus, and it says, "Whose fan is in his hand, and he will thoroughly purge his floor and gather his wheat into the garner, but he will burn up the chaff with unquenchable fire." Okay? So what he's talking about is when he says his fan is in his hand. Okay, a fan was kind of like a pitchfork, or kind of like a rake, almost like, okay? And what they used to do is they gathered up the wheat. And then they used this pitchfork to beat the wheat. And then they would throw it in the air, and the little wheat the chaff would blow away just with the slightest of wind, and the wheat would fall onto the threshing floor. And they would just repeat the process until they were just left with the wheat. He was separating the good from the bad, in other words, you know. And what they're simply saying, what this simply means, is that It says his fan is in his hand. It's not in the corner. It's not nowhere else. It's in his hand because Jesus is actively separating the good from the bad. But in us, he's able to separate that good. He's able to separate you from that drug mind. Okay? Jesus is able and willing, and his hand is not short. Even though they nailed his hand to a cross, they were never able to nail his hand to where it couldn't reach across time. Right now, his fan is in his hand and change a man. It was true 2,000 years ago, and it's true today. They were never able to hold back his hand from changing a man in his mind and in his heart. Jesus is able. He's well able. You know, and the shaft, you know, it blows away with just the slightest bit of wind. And that's a picture of the ungodly. Psalms 1. That's a picture of the ungodly. You know, they're here today, gone tomorrow, man. Johnny come lately. They're here, they're going with every wisp of the wind. But the righteous is not so. They're like a tree planted by the river of living water. And when the storms come and it starts raining, they ain't going nowhere. They're going to stand, and they're going to make a stand for Jesus. And at this end day, he's separating the wheat from the chaff. And he's calling you because he's willing. His fan is in his hand, and he's reaching out for you through space and time. Reaching out for you. And his hand's there. And you say, you know, Soda Jerk, I can't do this, man. I don't have it in me. I don't have the strength. Jesus knows that. We know, he knows you can't, but he can. It's when you are weak, then you are strong. It's when you know you are weak and you have to lean upon him. He will give you the strength you need. You can't, but Jesus can. He's so in love with you. Don't give up. Change is going to come. And right now, through time and space, this very day, Jesus is holding out his hand. Now, what are you going to do? You got two choices. You could take his hand, by his righteous right hand, or you could push it away. But whatever you do, make your choice, because you know what? That sticking that needle in your arm or smoking what you're smoking, okay, it could be your last time. And you may not get another chance. And if you decide to grab his hand, make up your mind that you're going to do this, because you know what? You'll never be the same again. I never was, but it's for the better. And today, Jesus is holding out his hand. What are you going to do? God bless you, hermanos. So if you like what you just heard, please subscribe. It don't cost you a thing to subscribe to my channel. As I go out and I bring awareness to this epidemic in America. And hit the thumbs up, leave a comment. But the most important thing is if you could send me a letter on one page. If God has taken you out of addiction, people want to hear, I could share about it on this channel. That's what this channel is about. And so on one page, write your testimony of how God has taken you out of addiction and send it to this address right here.